Hi everyone. So recently I actually had the chance to play in a chess congress, which is a unique experience in that if you've not played in one before, basically it's like a chess tournament, but all the games happen over just a couple of days rather than a long 2 month period where you're just playing one game a week. So especially given the weather at the moment over the weekend that this happened, it was very hot and quite tiring. Definitely something I need to get more used to. Just playing 3 games in a row on a day with the classical time format. These weren't just rapid games, so each game was an hour and a half at least, some definitely longer. And just mentally, physically being able to sit in a chair for that long is quite something. Um, so the Congress itself, I entered into the under 1900 section, which I thought gave me the best chance to find people of slightly above my rating, but still definitely playable opponents. And in doing so, it meant that I could have entered into the Open. But if I lose a game, I don't get randomly paired against some 800 rated player, and if I win a game, I don't get randomly placed against some very high rated player. There was even a Grandmaster that turned up, which should have been a great learning experience, but I probably would have lost very quickly. So yeah, that was sort of my mindset in entering into the under 1900s. I thought it gave me a good chance to definitely learn some stuff, whereas still being able to have decent games and not feeling like I've just been blown out of the water. Now, for this event, I didn't know any of my opponents beforehand, so it's pretty much just turn up on the day and just play chess. So I just had to give a quick general overview of my openings and tactics, and yeah, just general chess, pretty much. I actually arrived late and I was stressing the whole time, but I was lucky in that my opponent, the first woman that I had to face, she was also late, so it was quite nice that I wasn't sort of making somebody else wait. But eventually she showed up like 10 minutes after me, and we got into our first game. I was with the white pieces, and as we know, I play knight f3. She plays c5. Now, the part of the reason why I'm playing knight f3 to go into the castle, which is basically a d4 opening, rather than starting with d4 itself, is to avoid ideas of Benoni or Benko gambits and just not having to learn that theory. Now, obviously, you can't just have an upside in chess. You can't just not do something that needs to be downside. The downside to doing this move order is that you then also have to know the English as a sort of an opening that can definitely be played against you. And yeah, you can't now, so you sort of just stopped playing d4, and I sort of have to follow suit now and just go into an English. It can transpose, so it could go back to a sort of Tarrasch system, and then I would get a d4 opening, but in the game, and quite often, um, yeah, you just get an English, and people tend to also play symmetrically. I find that when you're playing the Reti and people don't understand it as much, perhaps, then they just like to play symmetrically and just sort of copycat. um, so knight f3, and f6 even, knight c3. So my idea is at some point I'm going to play d4, but I want to make sure that my knights are out first. She plays e6. Um, Now, I knew this was a completely playable move, but as I found out later in my preparation, this isn't even in my preparation, which is not a good idea because it confused me for a while, as we're about to see after a couple of moves. So I played d4 as normal, she took, I took, and then she plays this annoying move, bishop b4, pinning my knight. Now, the reason why this is weird to me is because in this position, I have knight c6 prepared, so after this whole exchange happens, I have this extra tempo, and my plan is always to play a3 and just avoid this idea entirely because it's quite annoying. But which is why I spent some time in the opening thinking about this position, because I've just sort of allowed her to do things this annoying. Now, if I had more confidence in this opening, I would have played g3 very natural, this bishop is going to where it belongs. And the point is that it's actually bad for black to take here, because even though it doubles my pawns, it's just you're giving up basically the only thing that you developed. You still got to develop all your queenside that are stuck behind pawns. And these two double pawns don't actually seem to be a weakness, and they're even preventing d5 for quite a while. But I didn't know this, so I didn't play it, and the computer already gives a plus 1.7 advantage for white, so this is definitely something I need to go for the future. And even in the database, like, white is always scoring much better than black, so yeah, something done. So I play the more passive and timid move of queen c2, sort of a Nimzo Indian idea of just defending the knight in classical style and not having the doubled up pawns. But in this situation, it's completely okay, which I didn't know. She brings the queen up. Now, the knight's attack, so I have to defend it. I did think for a while about maybe playing this, but I wasn't a fan of this position. The computer actually likes it because it's saying that basically all your pieces are developed. Again, I need better understanding of the English. Is what we've learned from this game, I think. But instead I just defend it with e3. Another downside of e3 is it's not very dynamic in the sense that this bishop is now going to be stuck behind this pawn for ages, and it would be nicer to play e4 on one move and just have a nice control over the d5 square. She develops some knight, I take, she takes, and now I play a3, want to kick her away. She trades, which I was actually happy to see. And now I think in this position, I thought about it for it, and pretty much her best move, and from a human standpoint as well, is she has to play d5 in this situation. She needs to break in the centre, and she needs to be able to gain space. What she played in the game as castles is also okay, but it allows for a nice positional idea that I saw in a game recently with my coach, of just playing c5 and completely locking black down and really hurting their development, because this pawn is now no longer pushing. I can always take with en passant, and if it does push and I take, then it means that they've got an isolated pawn on the c-file, which would be a nice target for me. And it just means that developing this bishop is now harder, this rook's going to be harder to develop, and I've even gained a tempo on the queen whilst doing it. So, although I've neglected development for a bit, this is definitely the right way to go about it, I think. So she has to bring the queen back. I develop my bishop, allowing castling. She goes for a5. a5, yeah. Just gaining space. I castle. She then goes for a bishop trade because my bishop is definitely much better than hers, and her bishop wouldn't have much prospects behind this pawn, so it's very much in her interest to trade. I'm okay with trading, and because it sort of disconnects her rooks, even though my bishop was much better, there is a downside for this for her. Here, I need to start coming up with a plan, and it's very clear that her weakness is this d7 pawn, and it's how do I go about doing this. I could do this immediately with the rook, but I feel she just defends, the knight's already defending, and my bishop is still stuck, which is trapping my rook. So the idea is that I want to play e4, and to do this I need to prepare it with f3. Just so I can sort of expand slightly and then give this bishop a lot more better life, rather than, because I want to move it to d2 and trap my rook on the file. That's just not great. Now, what I did miss in the game is I knew this tactic existed because I saw it in some other variations about the knight coming into e4, but for some reason I didn't process that that could then mean, oh, oops, sorry. I could also just play e4 anyway, and I don't even have to prepare it because of this nice tactic of knight takes, but then queen forking the knight and rook, and you can't defend both of them because the only square that could defend both is taking this pawn. That's probably the best move, just so you get another pawn. But now white is really dominating the position. This is quite hard for black to play. I guess this and bishop e3, and yeah, all my pieces are just coming together. And although black is up a pawn or two pawns and even has a pass pawn, we've connected, it's just not enough. So yeah, e4 would have been a more accurate move, but nonetheless, f3 to prepare it in e4. She places the knight in the center. It's good square. Now I play c4 anyway, just to gain the tempo, attack the rook, and also meaning that I can then play e4 next turn, because she has to do something about the rook. She defends it this way, which is fine. I just think it might have been better to drop the rook back and then have the rooks connected this way, which would be I think more of an active way, even though they're retreating. So of course I attack the knight. She plays to knight f4. Now the computer argues that I shouldn't trade here. It just seemed to me at the time, if I trade here, pretty much black doesn't have a plan at all. And so by trading takes, and then bringing a rook to the file, this d7 weakness is really clear, and the knight is no longer back on f6 defending it. This queen can't really defend it unless she wants to play really passively. I could then bring the other rook here, we can double up and really go after this, and maybe whilst they're tampered down holding on to that, I can then maybe take this weakness of the pawn. I felt like this was a good position for me. She now plays rook a7. I was very happy to see this at the time, and I thought this was now winning for white through a nice tactic, if you want to pause the video and see. So, the nice tactic is that this rook isn't actually defending the pawn, because after rook takes, then I can take this rook over here. Now, that's great, and it's definitely the best course of action for white, but it's not as winning as you'd think it would be, which was quite surprising to me after I saw it after the game. Because after rook takes, queen takes, I saw up to this point of queen check on e3, move the king, and I don't want to block because then this becomes awful and I'm probably just losing. So yep, just move the king, and I saw up to this point, and I thought, oh, she'll just recapture the pawn here, and then I also thought, oh well, she actually can't do that because I'm threatening checkmate and the rook and everything, so she probably has to bring the rook back like this. And then I can start grabbing these pawns. I can even defend the c5 pawn by taking here. Or, yeah, taking here and defending as well. The move that I overlooked, and it's the only move really for black to sort of stay in the game, is to play queen d3, which I think is a hard move to spot when I was sort of planning tactics back here. But the idea of this move is you're now defending against back rank mate because you can just slide the rook back, and now you've got a great position, you're controlling the only file. Yeah, this is great for black. And the only other option really for white is to exchange. And we're now in a rook endgame with one pawn up, but this pawn is probably going to fall at some point. It's really hard to do anything without just being really passive. This is probably going to end in a draw with decent play, and it's not too hard for black to draw it in this position, I don't think. So yeah, I missed this resource from black, which is why when I took on d7 I was really happy because I thought, oh, actually this is my advantage, I'm probably going to win now. But I missed this move, but so did my opponent. So she played g6, and this is definitely a blunder because of a nice, just simple queen c8, and she's losing the rook. She did stop checkmate, but she didn't stop just losing the game on the spot. She could have. I wonder what the difference is with her playing queen c2. The difference is that if the queen's here, then it's also attacking the rook, so you have to exchange. Okay. But yeah, she just blunders the rook, unfortunately, and this is now sort of game over. I take. She takes my pawn. I control the file, just making sure that I'm not going to blunder back rank mate, and my queen and rook are connected. It also makes it easy. My plan is pretty much just swap the queens and then have a rook, and then I just can't lose the game at that point. So I'm just probing for checks and trades, and eventually in this position there's a nice way to trade off queens. So check the king once more, only one square, and now forking the king and queen, the queens have to be traded or you lose a queen. And at this point I'm just up a full rook. And the game's pretty much over. My opponent actually played on for a while and didn't resign. which was a bit surprising, but fair enough. I guess if you got another 2 or 3 hours until the next round, there's no point just ending the game right away and then sitting around eating crystal sandwiches for a while. So the game continued. She's just pushing pawns, but I'm just going to go after the pawns on the queen side and just take them and ignore what else is happening. A nice move here, I thought, rather than taking it and making it any more complicated, just push. And now this king is going to be trapped off. And there's no way for the king to come into the game and, yeah, and can't stop my pawns. I probably should have done the same thing here, but for some reason I took. That's probably a slight mistake, but yeah, the game's just winning at this point, and we just played on. Even let her queen just take back. And sadly, in this position, she actually resigned the game finally. It was a bit annoying because we played so many moves. I guess she was going for stalemate traps, perhaps, but she finally resigned when I had a mate in two, which is unfortunate because I feel like if you've waited this long, then at least that the opponent plays a mate. But yeah, this would have been two-move mate, you can't stop it, which I saw. But yeah, this is game one from Mill Hill. There's 5 games in total, and I hope to be uploading the rest of these videos. In general, my thoughts on the tournament was I wasn't unhappy with how I played, but I wasn't exactly happy either. There's definitely some issues in my play that were quite evident from this tournament, and it's why when I played against Zoe, I was much more focused on dynamic and sort of fundamental easy chess and not trying to make things harder for myself. And we can see, you will see, that playing like that is just so much more fun to play, rather than perhaps making things a bit too complicated in this tournament. But yeah, I'll upload round 2 at some point. But until then, see ya.